All right. And the last thing that I want to do before we actually start typing away is to set up normalize CSS and global styles. And before we continue, let me just say that throughout the project, we will use CSS in JS, more specifically styled components. And I'm going to talk about my choices once we actually get there, once we install the styled components and all that. But with that said, don't worry, we won't be typing CSS. Only the first page, I believe, the landing page, will type out the CSS, and then I'll show you where to get all the resources. Because like I said before, if we'll start typing CSS for this type of project, then it's just going to be easily another 5 hours of our time. And essentially, even though I'm a big fan of CSS in JS, I'm even a bigger fan of normalized CSS and global styles for the following reasons, because it really saves me time on the setup, and I use the same setup pretty much in every project, not just React one or Gatsby one or whatever. Even if it's just HTML and CSS, I actually use this type of setup because it allows me to type less lines of code, the CSS code, and in the process, it speeds up the development tremendously. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we start using it. Now, what is normalized CSS? For those of you who don't know, it's a small CSS file that pretty much provides a cross-browser consistency in the default styling of HTML elements. Now, if you want to find out more info, here's the resource for normalize. And as far as the install, we need to look for npm install and then normalize CSS. So let me show you their homepage. Basically, this is where you navigate. Now, if you want, you can download. Effectively, this is just going to be a CSS code, which you can add to any of the files you want. But in our case, we're going to go with npm and install. Then we want to import normalize CSS in the index.js. But what's really, really important is to place it before index.css. So if we take a look at our index.js right now, we do have index.css, correct? So once we install the normalized one, we want to import that in the index.js because we want to apply it to entire project, but we want to do it before index.css because in our global styles, we will be relying on the normalized one. And as far as the global styles, we just want to replace the content of the index.css. Now, if you do have any questions about normalized or specific styles, on my channel, Coding Addict, there's an actual video by the name of Default Starter where I cover everything in great detail. And I actually created a repo with my default starter as well, which again, I utilize pretty much in every project. So let's start by getting the normalized CSS. Again, just follow the link or simply type npm install normalize CSS. And in my case, I'm going to showcase one more time the site. Okay, this is where you navigate, you grab the command. I'm going to stop the server with Control and C. And then we want to copy and paste, install normalize CSS. And then, like I said, we're looking for index.js. And before index.css, we simply want to go with import. And then let's just type normalize and CSS. So this is going to give us that basic setup. And essentially, just a quick side note, when we're talking about normalize, it's a fancier way of doing this. So with margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, and we're applying that to all the elements. So this is just a fancier way of doing that. So let me spin this up, npm start. And then once everything is up and running, we just need to get our index CSS replaced by the whatever we have in the assets. So let me navigate to the assets. We're looking for CSS file, index CSS. And again, you can either drag and drop or you can just copy the contents. So in my case, I think I'm just going to drag and drop. Yep. I want to move it to the source. Again, it's going to ask whether I want to replace it. Yep, I do. And then once we save it, we should see different styles. And if you take a look at the index CSS, it's pretty much a bare bones setup where I'm using some CSS variables for the colors. So you can always replace those. Of course, there's some fonts. There's also box shadows and all that. Then there's some typography setup. And if we keep on scrolling, there's also some global classes. And again, the benefit of such setup is the fact that I don't have to repeat myself throughout the project, which in the long run saves me a bunch of time. And if I ever need to customize something, I can do that very quickly with the help of styled components, which we're going to cover in few videos. But in general, yes, this is pretty much my default setup. And if you do want to find out more info, again, here's the video where I cover everything in much greater detail, as well as the repo where you can find all the code. And with this in place, we can actually start typing away. And I think we'll start with our landing page.